The high school football game was only a day away. Ethan stood in front of the mirror in his small bedroom, adjusting his red jersey. For a moment, excitement flickered in his eyes. But it quickly faded as he imagined his father in the stands, wearing the same worn-out jacket, the faded shoes. The tired face of a man who had worked too hard for too long. Last year's memory came back like a sharp sting, when his father cheered loudly from the bleachers. A few of Ethan's classmates had laughed. "Who's that guy? Look at his clothes." Their words had cut into him, leaving behind a wound he could not shake. It wasn't that Ethan didn't love his father. He did, more than anything. But the fear of ridicule pressed down heavier than his affection. And this time, he knew he had to say it out loud. At dinner that night, the table was modest, a few simple dishes under the weak yellow light. His father, smiling as always, spoke with pride in his voice. "Tomorrow's the big game. I'll be there cheering you on." Ethan froze, his chopsticks shaking slightly. His throat tightened, but he forced the words out. "Dad, please don't come. I don't want you there." Silence fell over the room. His father's smile faltered for just a second. He didn't ask why. He didn't protest. He only nodded faintly and took another bite of food, though his eyes no longer carried their usual light. That night, Ethan lay awake in bed. He wished his father could somehow understand the truth. "I'm not ashamed of you, Dad. I'm ashamed of what others will say. I still love you. I just can't face them." But those words never left his lips. The old man lay awake long after Ethan had gone to bed. The room was quiet, but inside his chest the silence roared. His son's words echoed again and again. "Dad, please don't come." He turned to the window, watching the faint glow of streetlights spill through the glass. The world outside was calm, yet his heart felt heavy. He knew what his son meant, even if Ethan had not said it outright. The jacket he wore was too old, the shoes too thin, his presence too out of place among the polished families in the stands. He remembered the last time he went to cheer. The laughter of strangers had reached his ears. He had pretended not to hear, pretending that his son hadn't stiffened on the field. But the memory lingered, a quiet scar. Still, he had thought, hoped, that his son would understand. That the sound of his voice, no matter how rough, was meant to lift him up. That a father's cheer was not about appearances, but about love. But now, faced with the truth, he swallowed his pride. The following morning, he rose early, the same way he always did. He packed his lunch in a small metal box, tied his boots, and left for work. His body ached, his hands rough and cracked, but he carried on. Every blow of the hammer, every drop of sweat, was for the boy he loved more than life itself. At midday, he paused to drink water. His co-workers laughed and joked, talking about their own children. He listened quietly, offering a small smile, but his mind drifted back to Ethan. The words don't come not at him, yet he told no one. That evening, when he returned home, Ethan was already asleep. The father stood by the doorway, watching the boy's peaceful face. For a moment, pride swelled in his chest. His son was strong, talented, a star on the field. But beneath that pride lay a quiet ache. He whispered into the darkness, words his son would never hear. "I'll stay away, if that's what you want. But I'll still be there, son, even if you don't see me." The night before the big game, the house was unusually quiet. Ethan sat at his desk, books open but unread, his mind fixed on tomorrow. He could almost hear the roar of the crowd, see the bright lights shining down on the field. It should have filled him with excitement, yet something inside him felt unsettled. He thought of his father again, sitting at the dinner table, silent after his words. The look in his father's eyes had been brief, but Ethan could not forget it. A shadow of hurt, quickly hidden behind a tired smile. Ethan pressed his face into his hands. I had to say it, he told himself. It's for the best. Tomorrow, I need to focus. I can't let the guys see him, not like that. But the thought did not bring relief. Instead, guilt coiled quietly inside him. In the next room, his father prepared for the day ahead in his own way. He set out his old jacket, brushing it clean as best as he could. He looked at his shoes, cracked at the edges, and polished them with care. He knew he had promised himself not to come. Yet something deeper inside refused to let him stay away completely. The man walked to the small window, watching the rain begin to fall outside. Drops streaked down the glass, tapping gently against the sill. He closed his eyes, listening. The rain reminded him of other nights, years ago, when Ethan was just a boy kicking a ball in the mud, laughing, unbothered by the storm. Back then, his son had run into his arms, proud to call him dad. Now things were different. The boy was growing, stepping into a new world. And he, the father, felt himself being left behind. Later that night, as Ethan finally drifted into uneasy sleep, his father remained awake. He sat by the small table with a candle burning low, staring at a photo of his son in uniform. Pride and sorrow mixed in his chest. He whispered softly into the empty room. Tomorrow, I'll still be there for you, even if it's from a distance. You may not want me by your side, but I will not let you play alone. Morning came with the sound of rain tapping against the roof. Ethan woke early, nerves already stirring in his stomach. Today was the day. He pulled on his uniform slowly, every piece a reminder of the weight he carried. The red jersey, the helmet, the cleats, they made him feel powerful, yet also exposed. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled faintly of coffee. His father sat at the table, his hands wrapped around a chipped mug. He looked up as Ethan walked in, offering a small smile. Big day, he said quietly. Ethan only nodded, grabbing a piece of toast. Words felt heavy between them, like stones no one dared to lift. The bus horn sounded from the street. Ethan slung his bag over his shoulder, eyes fixed on the door. His father rose, wanting to say something, anything. But all that came out was, "Good luck, son." Ethan paused for just a heartbeat, then whispered, "Thanks," before hurrying out. The old man stood at the window, watching as the bus pulled away, carrying his boy toward the stadium. He lingered there long after the sound of the engine faded. His hand pressed against the glass as though he could hold on to the moment. Later that afternoon, the stadium came alive. Families crowded the stands, waving banners, shouting names, their cheers echoing under the gray sky. Parents snapped photos, children painted their faces in school colors. It was a celebration, a sea of energy. Outside the gates, the father arrived on foot. He kept his distance, standing just beyond the entrance. The security guard checked tickets, letting one family after another pass through. The man touched his pocket, empty. He had no ticket, no way inside. So he walked along the edge of the stadium until he found the chain-link fence that bordered the field. The rain had grown heavier now, drops soaking through his jacket, but he paid it no mind. His eyes searched the field until he spotted Ethan. There he was, helmet shining under the floodlights, standing with his teammates. Strong, determined, ready. The father's chest swelled with pride. He gripped the cold metal of the fence and whispered under his breath, too soft for anyone to hear. "I'm here, son, just like I promised." The rain did not stop. It slid down his forehead, soaked his shoulders, clung to his old jacket until it grew heavy on his back. Still, the father stayed by the fence, unmoving, his eyes locked on the field. From where he stood, he could see only fragments of the game, players rushing past, the ball flashing in and out of sight. He had to shift along the fence line, straining for a better view. To anyone else, It might have seemed pointless, but for him it was everything. Every time Ethan touched the ball, his heart leapt. Every time his son stumbled, his chest tightened. And though his voice was drowned out by the roar of the crowd inside, he shouted anyway. "Go, Ethan! Run, son!" The words carried into the storm, swallowed by thunder and rain, but still he shouted. His hands clenched the fence, knuckles white, as if his grip could somehow push his son forward. Some fans passing by on the sidewalk noticed him, a soaked man yelling through the fence, and shook their heads. But he didn't care. Pride outweighed shame. This was his boy, and nothing could silence him. Inside the stadium, Ethan felt something stir. A voice, faint, yet familiar, seemed to reach him through the noise. His chest tightened, but he forced himself not to look. It can't be, he thought. He wouldn't be here, not after what I said. But the voice came again, carried on the rain, ragged but unbroken. And though Ethan tried to focus on the field, his heart knew. His father was there. The old man shivered in the cold, water dripping from his hair, but a quiet determination burned in his eyes. He had made his choice. Whether welcome or not, he would stand there until the very last whistle, cheering from the shadows. "If I can't be beside you," he murmured, "then I'll be here. As close as I'm allowed." The whistle pierced the air, sharp and commanding, and the game came alive. Players clashed at the line of scrimmage. Bodies colliding with force, cleats digging into the wet grass. The crowd erupted, a storm of cheers and chants that rose higher than the rain itself. From behind the fence, the father leaned forward, pressing his forehead against the cold wire mesh. His breath came in heavy bursts, clouding the metal, as his eyes followed every movement of his son. Ethan sprinted down the field, mud splashing with every step. His jersey clung to him, heavy from the rain, but he pushed through. The quarterback shouted commands, the ball snapped. And for a fleeting second Ethan had it in his hands. He charged forward, breaking a tackle before being dragged down. The stands roared with approval. The father slammed his palm against the fence, his voice cracking through the storm. "Yes, that's my boy. Keep going." His shout was swallowed by thunder, but his heart didn't care. To him, Ethan had flown. Play after play, the game raged on. The rival team was tough, their defense ruthless. Ethan stumbled once, nearly falling, but he caught himself and pressed on. The father's throat burned from shouting, his hands stiff from the cold, yet he refused to stop. And then it happened. Ethan paused for just a moment between plays, glancing toward the edge of the field. His eyes caught a shadow beyond the glare of the lights. A figure pressed against the fence in the rain. It was only a heartbeat, a flicker of recognition, but it was enough. Ethan's chest tightened. He knew. His father hadn't stayed home. He was here, drenched, shivering, ignored by the crowd, but here. Ethan clenched his fists, jaw tightening. Anger and shame battled with something else, something deeper, a pulse of warmth, of strength. He turned back to the field as the next play was called. But the image of his father at the fence burned in his mind. Behind the wire, the old man whispered through trembling lips. "You're not alone out there, son." The rain grew heavier, pounding against helmets, jerseys, and the slick field. Water pooled along the sidelines, turning grass into mud. Every step became a battle, every play a test of will. Ethan's team huddled together, voices straining against the storm. The quarterback barked orders, teammates slapped shoulders, trying to ignite fire in the cold. Ethan stood among them, his chest heaving, but his mind was elsewhere. The image of his father clinging to the fence would not leave him. A whistle shrieked, and the game surged forward again. The rival team was relentless, breaking through lines, forcing turnovers. The crowd groaned with every mistake, umbrellas shaking in the downpour. On the other side of the fence, the father's jacket was soaked through. Rain ran down his face in streams, but he did not wipe it away. His hands gripped the wire so tightly his knuckles had turned pale. "Come on, Ethan, you can do this," he muttered, his voice raw. A hard tackle sent Ethan sprawling into the mud. Gasps rippled through the stands. For a moment, he lay still, rain pelting his helmet. The father pressed closer to the fence, his heart pounding. "Get up, son, get up." Slowly, Ethan pushed himself to his knees, mud dripping from his uniform. He staggered to his feet, shaking it off, and the crowd cheered with relief. But his eyes, just for a second, flicked to the fence. He knew who was watching. The storm raged on. Thunder cracked overhead, lightning flashed against the steel bleachers. Some parents covered their children, some fans retreated under shelter. But the father never moved. As the next play began, Ethan tightened his grip on the ball. His muscles screamed, his body heavy, but something inside him steadied. Beyond the lights, beyond the rain. He felt the weight of those eyes on him, not mocking, not ashamed, only proud. With a deep breath, he lowered his shoulders and ran headlong into the storm. The game pressed on, the storm showing no mercy. Players slipped in the mud, the ball skidded across wet grass. And every tackle sent water flying like shattered glass. Yet through the chaos, Ethan's focus sharpened. He crouched in formation, heart pounding against his chest. The quarterback called the play, the snap cracked, and the ball was in motion. Ethan darted downfield, his cleats fighting for grip. The roar of the crowd blended with the crash of rain, until another sound cut through. It was faint, rough, carried on the storm. A voice that did not belong to the thousands in the stands. A voice he knew. "Go, Ethan. Don't stop." His breath caught. For a moment, the world narrowed. The fence, the shadowed figure beyond it. A hand raised against the rain. His father. Ethan stumbled, almost missing his step, but quickly regained his footing. His chest tightened as he surged forward, catching the ball just before a defender slammed into him. The collision sent them both crashing to the ground, mud splattering across his visor. The crowd roared, but Ethan heard none of it. As he pushed himself up, spitting mud, he heard it again, louder this time, desperate, unyielding. "I'm here, son. Keep fighting." Ethan froze for a heartbeat, his helmet turning toward the fence. Through the sheets of rain, their eyes met. His father's clothes clung to him like a second skin. Drenched and ragged, but his face burned with pride. The boy's throat tightened. Shame, anger, love, everything collided inside him, a storm fiercer than the one above. He turned away quickly, forcing himself back into the huddle, but the sound of his father's voice echoed in his ears. For the first time, Ethan realized his father hadn't stayed away. No matter what he had said, no matter the rain, no matter the shame, the man was there. And something in Ethan's heart began to shift. The scoreboard glowed through the rain. Home 7, visitors 14. Only minutes remained in the third quarter, and Ethan's team was falling behind. The crowd's cheers had turned into nervous murmurs, umbrellas bobbing like restless waves. In the huddle, the coach shouted over the storm. "We need fire. We need heart. Don't let this slip away." His words pounded in Ethan's ears. But his father's voice still lingered louder. "I'm here, son. Keep fighting." The next play began. The snap cracked. The quarterback faked left, then tossed the ball wide. Ethan caught it, clutching it close as defenders rushed in. His cleats tore through the mud, water splashing with every stride. One tackle hit hard, then another, but he kept moving, his legs pumping like pistons. "Go, Ethan!" The shout carried again from beyond the fence. Something lit inside him. Strength surged where exhaustion had lived. He broke free from the grip of one defender, then another, stumbling but refusing to fall. Finally, a crushing hit sent him sprawling near the sideline, inches from a first down. The crowd erupted, half cheering, half gasping at the sight. His teammates rushed to pull him up, slapping his helmet. The coach barked for the next play, eyes fierce. Ethan staggered into position. The storm blurred the world around him, but his mind was clear. He wasn't just playing for the scoreboard anymore. He was playing for the man outside the fence, soaked to the bone, shouting until his voice broke. The whistle blew. The ball snapped again. This time, Ethan was the target. The pass sailed through the rain, slippery and spinning. He leapt, fingers stretching, heart hammering. The ball smacked into his palms. He landed hard, skidding through mud, but when he rose, the chains had moved. First down. The stadium thundered with applause, but Ethan's eyes darted only once, searching the fence. There he was, his father, slamming his fist against the wire, shouting with pride. For the first time that night, Ethan didn't look away. The fourth quarter began under a sky split by lightning. The score was still against them, home 14, visitors 21. The tension in the stadium was sharp enough to cut. Every play mattered now. Ethan stood on the sideline, bent over, gasping for breath. Mud clung to his uniform, his helmet dripping rain into his eyes. He wiped it away with the back of his glove and forced himself upright. His body ached, but his father's voice rang in his ears. "You're not alone out there, son." The coach called the final play of the drive. They needed a touchdown, nothing less. The team huddled, eyes fierce, hearts pounding. Ethan felt his teammates' hands slap against his shoulders. They trusted him. The ball was coming to him. The whistle shrieked. The snap cracked. The quarterback dropped back, searching through the blur of defenders. Ethan sprinted downfield, cutting through the mud, pushing harder than ever before. His lungs burned, his legs screamed, but he didn't slow. The ball soared through the storm, wobbling slightly in the rain. Time seemed to stretch as it arched toward him. A defender closed in, arms outstretched, ready to intercept. "Ethan!" The cry pierced the storm. His father's voice. Ethan leapt, his hands stretched high, fingers brushing the slick leather. For a moment, it seemed the ball might slip away, but his grip tightened, pulling it to his chest as he crashed into the mud. The crowd erupted, half in cheers, half in disbelief. Ethan rolled, scrambling to his feet, and ran. The end zone loomed ahead. The defender dove, clutching at his legs, but Ethan lunged forward, stretching the ball across the line before collapsing into the soaked grass. Touchdown! The stadium exploded. Fans jumped to their feet, shouting his name, umbrellas forgotten in the storm. His teammates piled onto him, slapping his helmet, dragging him up in celebration. Through the chaos, Ethan turned his head. At the edge of the field, beyond the fence, his father stood with arms raised high, soaked, shaking, but smiling through tears. Their eyes locked, and for the first time, Ethan felt no shame, only pride. The scoreboard now read 21-21. The game was tied, the storm raging harder than ever. Both teams lined up for the final minutes, the crowd trembling with anticipation. On the sideline, Ethan's teammates surrounded him, grinning, shouting, their hands pounding against his back. "That was all you, man. Unbelievable catch." But amid the noise, Ethan's eyes wandered again to the fence. There he was, his father, still pressed against the wire, soaked to the bone, shivering but refusing to leave. His voice had gone hoarse, but his fist still pounded the fence in rhythm with the crowd's cheer. One of Ethan's teammates noticed where he was looking. He followed Ethan's gaze, then spotted the lone figure in the storm. The boy's eyes widened. "Is that your dad?" Ethan swallowed hard, unable to answer, but he didn't need to. The pride, the pain, the love all written across his face told the story. The teammate nodded slowly, then turned to the others. Soon, whispers spread through the huddle. They looked from Ethan to the fence, to the man who had stood there the entire game. Not one of them laughed. Instead, something else filled their eyes: respect. The next break in the game came with a timeout. And in that moment, without a word, two of Ethan's teammates jogged to the edge of the field, toward the fence. They pushed the gate open against the weight of the rain. "Sir," one of them called out, "come on. You don't belong out there. You belong in here." The father blinked, stunned, as though he hadn't heard correctly. Rain streamed down his cheeks, mixing with tears he hadn't realized were falling. Another teammate waved him forward. "You've been cheering harder than anyone. This one belongs to you too." For a moment, the man hesitated, clutching the fence as if it were the only thing holding him up. But then, slowly, almost disbelieving, he stepped toward the open gate. As he crossed the line, into the stadium lights, the crowd noticed. One by one, voices rose, first in surprise, then in applause. A ripple spread through the stands until the entire stadium was on its feet. The father stood inside the field now, drenched, trembling, yet lifted by the roar of hundreds of voices. And in the middle of it all, Ethan stared at him, heart pounding, unable to move. His father was no longer a shadow at the fence. He was part of the game. The sound rose like thunder. The entire stadium stood, clapping, cheering, their voices rolling together in a wave that shook the very air. It wasn't for a touchdown, or a victory, or a highlight play. It was for him, the man who had stood outside the fence in the rain, who had cheered until his voice broke. The father froze at first, stunned by the roar. For years he had lived in the shadows, unnoticed, invisible among the proud and polished families. But now every eye was on him, and instead of ridicule, he found only respect. Children pointed from the stands. Parents nodded, some even wiping their eyes. The players on the sideline clapped their hands against their pads, stomping their cleats into the soaked ground in unison. Ethan's teammates surrounded his father, guiding him further onto the field. One of them threw an arm around his soaked shoulders, grinning wide. "We've got another player tonight," he shouted to the crowd, and the cheers grew louder still. Ethan stood frozen, his helmet in his hands. His heart pounded, his throat tight, as he watched his father step into the light. For so long, he had feared this moment, the stares, the whispers, the laughter. But there was none of that. Only applause, only pride. The announcer's voice boomed through the speakers, half laughing, half choked with emotion. "Ladies and gentlemen, that's what love looks like." Tears blurred Ethan's vision. He no longer cared who saw. Slowly, he began to walk toward his father, the crowd parting in his mind until there was only the two of them. The storm still raged, lightning splitting the sky, rain hammering down. Yet for Ethan, the world had gone still, as if waiting for what came next. His father stood there, soaked and trembling, his eyes shining. And for the first time, Ethan wasn't ashamed. He was proud. The game pressed on, but for Ethan, something had already shifted. Every step he took back onto the field felt different. His shoulders were lighter, his chest fuller. The shame that had weighed on him for so long seemed to have washed away with the rain. He glanced once more to the sideline. His father stood there now, not behind a fence, not hidden in shadows, but among his teammates, his presence welcomed, his spirit honored. Ethan's lips curled into a smile beneath his helmet, a smile he hadn't worn in years. The whistle blew. The play began. Ethan moved with a fire he had never known before. His legs churned through the mud. His eyes burned with focus. His heart thundered with new strength. It wasn't just about proving himself anymore. It was about showing the world what his father had given him: grit, loyalty, and love that refused to yield. Every block, every run, every tackle, Ethan played harder. The crowd felt it too, their cheers echoing louder with each of his moves. His teammates rallied around him, inspired not only by his skill, but by the story unfolding before their eyes. And within himself, Ethan began to realize something. He had spent years resenting the man who stood at the edges of his life. Embarrassed by his worn clothes, by his silence, by his poverty. But tonight, under the storm and the lights, he saw the truth. His father had never been weak. He had been unbreakable. Between plays, Ethan lifted his helmet and locked eyes with his father again. He raised a hand, just a small gesture, but one that spoke volumes. His father's face lit up through the rain, a smile breaking like dawn after a long night. For the first time, Ethan wasn't just his father's son. He was proud to be. And that pride changed everything. The clock ticked down. Less than 2 minutes remained. The score was still tied, the storm refusing to let up. The field was a battlefield of mud and rain, every step a struggle, every breath a test of will. The coach gathered the team for one last play. His voice was steady, but his eyes burned with urgency. "This is it, boys. One shot. Make it count." Ethan's teammates looked to him, not just as a player, but as the heartbeat of the game. He felt their faith, their trust, pressing against him like the pounding rain. And deep inside, he felt his father's presence, not just as a voice beyond the fence, but as a force within him. The whistle blew. The formation set. The quarterback barked the cadence. The ball snapped. Ethan exploded off the line, his cleats digging deep into the sodden earth. The defenders chased, arms reaching, bodies crashing. The quarterback launched the ball high into the storm. It spun through the air, a blur against the lightning-streaked sky. Ethan ran, heart pounding, eyes locked. The world seemed to slow, the roar of the crowd dimming to silence. The ball fell, slick with rain. Ethan leapt, his body stretched to its limit, fingers outstretched. The ball slapped against his hands, nearly slipping. But he clutched it to his chest as he crashed into the end zone. Touchdown. For a heartbeat, the stadium was silent, as if no one could believe it. Then, like a tidal wave, the sound erupted. Cheers, screams, stomping feet, horns blaring. The scoreboard lit up. Home 28, visitors 21. Ethan lay on his back in the end zone, the rain pouring down on his face. Mixing with tears he didn't try to hide. His teammates swarmed him, lifting him to his feet, shouting his name. But through the chaos, his eyes searched only one place. There, on the sideline, stood his father. The man who had once been outside the fence was now in the heart of the field. Arms raised, his voice breaking as he cheered. Their eyes locked again, and Ethan pointed toward him, lifting the ball high for all to see. This victory wasn't his alone. It was theirs. The game was over. The scoreboard froze on victory, but the storm still raged. Players shook hands, coaches embraced, and the crowd's cheers rolled on like waves that refused to fade. Ethan pulled off his helmet, his hair plastered to his forehead, his chest heaving. But his eyes searched only for one figure. And there he was, his father, standing at the edge of the sideline, drenched, trembling, yet glowing with pride. For a moment, Ethan hesitated. The shame of years past tried to whisper into his heart. But it was drowned out by something louder, the memory of that voice through the storm, the hands pounding the fence, the unwavering presence. Slowly, Ethan walked forward. Each step felt heavy, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of everything unsaid. His teammates noticed and quietly stepped aside, giving him space. The crowd, sensing what was about to unfold, hushed, the roar fading into a low murmur. Finally, Ethan stood face to face with his father. Rain streamed down their faces, but neither cared. The father's lips trembled, searching for words. I didn't want to embarrass you, son. I just wanted you to know. I was there." Ethan's throat tightened. His voice cracked as he whispered, "I know, Dad. I know now." Then, without hesitation, he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around his father. The old man stiffened in shock, then melted into the embrace, clutching his son as if afraid to let go. The stadium erupted once more, not for a touchdown, not for a victory, but for this moment. Fans clapped, whistled, and cheered, some even wiping away tears. Ethan's teammates banged their helmets against the ground, shouting in celebration of something far greater than the game. Father and son held each other in the storm, and for the first time in years, neither felt alone. Long after the final whistle, the storm began to ease. The rain slowed to a drizzle, and the clouds parted just enough for the faint glow of the moon to shine through. The field was scarred with mud, the lights still blazing. But what remained was more than just the memory of a football game. That night became a story, one that spread far beyond the stadium. People who were there would remember not just the touchdown, not just the victory, but the sight of a father standing outside a fence, refusing to give up on his son. They would remember the boy who once felt shame, but found pride in the man who loved him more than anything. For Ethan, the win wasn't on the scoreboard. It was in the embrace with his father, in the knowledge that love could not be kept outside the fence. That lesson stayed with him, shaping the man he would become. And for his father, the cheers of the stadium were a reminder that his worth had never been measured by money, or clothes, or appearances, only by the strength of his heart. As the years passed, Ethan would carry that night with him, a flame to guide him through every challenge. And whenever he looked back, he would remember the storm, the crowd, the victory, but most of all, the man who stood with him through it all. Because sometimes, the greatest triumphs aren't won on the field, they're won in the heart. Thank you for listening to this story. Wishing everyone good health, happiness with your family, and always cherish the simplest loving moments in life.